Oh my goodness. What's in the box? What's inside?
Right, I'm so happy you're here.
It's good to be here.
Jason, open the box.
Okay.
Brian brought us a special surprise. Let's open the box. Let's see what we got.
Present here.
Yeah, there's not enough stuff sitting around the
Not enough collectibles.
studio here, so I thought I might bring you something to dress up.
Holy
Cool. That's pretty cool.
Oh my god. I can see through you.
It's not
That's
that
pretty
big,
dope.
guys.
Yeah, cool.
Look at that. That's
you,
a
Brian.
real one. That's a real one. That's a real
Yep.
G right there.
I was
And,
playing with my laser cutter.
An
and,
acrylic
what can I do?
cutout. And a 3D printed base with, a little...
It's not
Not
3D
3D
print. What is he talking
Is
about?
it
What are
not?
you talking about?
Oh, shoot.
No, that's straight
These
from
guys
China.
never gonna make it work.
That's a pre-tariff purchase. Good thing.
That's my man right there. Pre-terror, baby.
Thank you, Brian. This is awesome.
You bet.
That's cool.
Wow.
Okay.
you guys are not good.
Pulled
at
up
this.
and done. What's up, Pit Crew? Welcome back to another episode. We've got another guest for you today.
We're so excited.
So excited. Long time coming.
So bald. So Mr. Clean.
Mr. Brain.
Holy cow.
20 plus years in FRC. Mentor, not an alumni. Huge volunteer. Mentor for the Gatorbots. Referee, inspector, now head ref. Everybody, round of applause for Brian Moorhead. Hats off.
Hats off. Show you're bald.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you,
We'll
Brian.
see you next time,
Thank you
everyone.
for joining. Wow.
Jason, what's your secret?
My
A
secret.
full head of hair. The rest of us are
It's being a
shedding like
bad
crazy.
ref.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's the word. The better ref you are, the less hair you have.
That tracks. Okay,
So yeah, I just really bad at it.
I must be the best then.
You know, it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
It's
you're
true.
the top G. You're the top G of us all.
Yeah.
Brian, you want to give us your background, how you got started
Yeah.
with first? You want to take us all the way back to the phone call you got from my dad to start mentoring?
Sure.
Talk about
Yeah.
the phone call you got from my dad, but for a different reason.
No, we're not talking about that. Yeah, I was working at Ford, and my director, who I wasn't very happy with at the time, sent an email to the whole group and said, "Hey, there's this really great thing, First Robotics, Dearborn High team. She was a sponsor of." And I said a swear word out loud and hit the delete key. And I said, "I'm not doing that." And about 4 months later, your dad calls. I think it was a Sunday morning. I was out doing something, and he's like, "Hey, man, we could really use your help. Our software guy's not showing up anymore." I'm like, "Okay, when you thinking?" And he's like, "Well, now would be good, right?" It's like 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. Yeah. I'm like, "Okay, let me put some pants on, right? I'll come in." And I just immediately got hooked. I had been on a solar car team in college, and that was my life. And then this robots just happened to fit right in that same size hole. So I've been a mentor ever since. A couple of years later, I kind of moved out of software and kind of took over the lead mentor role of the team. And it's been a great 20 years.
Wow.
Incredible.
So have you always been with Gatorbots then? Or
That first year was Dearborn High,
Dearborn High.
and then they shut down their team after that season. I joined like Valentine's Day or something like that. So went to the Detroit district, or at that time regional. We won that thing, my first blue banner. Story behind that. And then, we did another Palmetto, I think, and then Worlds. And so I just immediately hooked on the thing. And then we came back, and the school was like, "No, we're done with this." But the kids on the team said, "Well, that's not acceptable." And so they went and found Henry Ford Academy, got us into a meeting. We go to this first meeting, and the kids introduced themselves. And then the HFA, Henry Ford Academy kids from 1250 said, "You guys broke our robot last year." This is pre-bumpers, right? They're like, "You broke our robot. We need you." Because I'm thinking, "Oh, we're screwed." They're not very happy with us. But they're like, "No, we need you. We need you to help us build better robots." And so a couple of the mentors, stuck with the team. And every time we take a tiny step forward, the mentors who were there would take a huge step back. And so week 3, we figured out we were running this team now. And we're like, "Oh, crap, we have to build a robot." And that year's robot was awful. So, yeah.
wow. What year was that?
That was, 05 was my first season. So 06 was my first year with HFA 1250. Their first year was 2004. So they were a very young team at that point.
Okay. When did you start reffing?
I think my first year was 2012 Rebound Rumble.
Really?
When did you get to the good stuff?
Yeah. I
skipped 10 years ahead.
I think I started inspecting a year or two before that. Records are kind of fuzzy that far back, but I think I started there because it really, up till 2008, we were on the regional model, right? Mm-hmm. And I just didn't have any visibility into that. So when districts came along and they started requiring volunteer hours for teams, I'm like, okay, well, I can do some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I started inspecting and then refereeing. And a lot of years I would do inspect and referee. So inspect Thursday night, referee the rest of the weekend, or CSA. I did quite a few years of CSA in there as well, and kind of mixing those two roles. I like refereeing a lot, and inspecting gets a little slow after the first, night and first morning. So
cool. So when were you don? When did you don the yellow?
My first season was 2019.
Really? That was your first season?
Yep. Belleville Event. My first head referee event. I did head ref Big Bang one year. I got 2016, I think that was. Yep. I show up not expecting it at all, and they're like, "Well, Brian can do it." I'm like, really? And I guess that went okay, and so yeah.
Wow. What was So in terms of games, you've been in the game the longest. What's your most memorable game? It could be any year, recent, older, and memorable from a team perspective or a ref perspective. Or they all just kind of blend together.
Amount of times you made a kid cry.
Volunteer
game perspective.
Yeah. Easy
every year. That doesn't rule any out. Triple play my first year, 2005. Right, was really me getting first involved. So that one's a deep impression for me. And I thought it was an interesting game, easy to understand for the most part, right? You're basically playing tic-tac-toe with these ever higher stacks of tetras. Not the best game, but that one is pretty deep-seated for me. 2013 I liked a lot, the Frisbees, and that was kind of a turning point for both FRC robots and our team, right? That was when Vex came out at first, and there were all these new parts available. Before that, right, you had Andy Mark, and they had some good stuff, but we're talking early days. There just wasn't the vendor ecosystem we have today. And so that was a game changer for us. And at the same time, we got introduced to MakerWorks in Ann Arbor. It's a do-it-yourself shop. And we got on their CNC plasma cutter. So that really changed how we built robots. So that's kind of another milestone for me, is our game changed. Because before that, it was do CAD, print it out, tape it to a piece of metal, punch it, cut it with a jigsaw kind of stuff. Tough to build good robots that way. But if you look back at our old robots, which is hard to do because a lot of them aren't online, there's a shift there that happened. And that really once you have CNC capability, you have all the more reason to do more CAD. And so our team kind of took off from there, I think.
Interesting. So kind of staying in the same lane with kind of the evolution of the FRC vendors. When it comes to COTS and the evolution of Swerve, what's your take on this?
I think the move to remove the budget cap, the official name, the bill of material cap. Yeah, I think it was a good move, because what we were seeing there was the really good teams didn't need to buy a COTS kit. They were making their own, right? And so that doesn't get tracked as a purchase on the old bill of material. And so therefore, if our team were to buy a kit, right, we would spend $3,000 roughly to put motors to that kit, the kit itself, encoders. By the time you spend all that, you're about $3,000 in. There's just no way around on your bill of material. So you only have $2,000 left to do everything else. You throw a Limelight in there, a couple other gearboxes, right? You're bumping up against the limit in a hurry. And the good teams, the really high resource teams, had just a path around that, because they could buy or get donated 3D printed parts, design their own Swerve kit, and they didn't have any of that limitation. So there was this gap, I think, that was opening up between the really haves and the really have-nots, or everybody else, frankly. Even we're kind of a mid-tier, maybe below mid-tier team, resource-wise. You know, we don't have those kind of resources to build. I would never consider, with our given resources, printing a swerve module, right? Let alone designing one. And so I think that really opened up the field for everyone. Now, the double-edged sword of that is, I heard a statistic that at Champs this year, 85% of teams had swerve, right? And probably most of those teams that didn't got there through some other award, right? And they're on their tank drive base. That's, I think, the downside of it is it kind of has become table stakes to being a competitive team.
Yeah.
Now, on the others, it keeps getting cheaper, but you kind of have to make that jump these days. I'm really waiting for that next game where swerve is like, ooh, this is going to be tough, right?
Just all cable protectors.
Or worse, like everyone complains about 2016 from a field reset perspective, but that was a great game.
That was a great game.
In terms of seeing that game in this era would be really interesting, I think.
Do you think they'd do that? Do you think?
I think part of the problem with that game wasn't necessarily the obstacles, but especially the notion that I want the rock wall over there. I know it's currently there. I don't want it there. I want it there, right? And so teams at will could just force any set of changes, right? If they had said, well, these two elements, you can choose between them, but they're always going to be in slot B, right? It would have knocked down a lot of that nonsense, because it would have been like, well, the drawbridge is already there. We want the drawbridge. No one has to move anything, instead of everyone moving everything every time.
That makes sense.
I think a logistical hack to that game that could have been made and
I think that was like
not cause as many injuries for the field reset staff.
Like, it was a good idea in theory, right? When you're designing the game, that sounds good. Like, oh, you can put them wherever you want. But then in practice, kind of like what you said, it's just kind of maybe not the best.
Well, there had never been anything like that in my experience. I haven't seen every game prior to 2005. I'm aware of like 2003, 2004. But I mean, just
that was the first year
that was insane.
A heavy theme, right?
Yeah. Oh, it was the modern era of we're going to announce the theme in the fall to get people ramped up on it, and then just the scale of that challenge, right? I know from a team perspective, we're like, we have to build all these damn field elements now to practice with.
Yeah.
It was insane. But then to have it all be hot swappable every match. And then the crowd occasionally gets to, choose one of the two.
Some
it's just
microphone app they used.
That year especially, you said building the different obstacles. There was still a discrepancy between the team version and the real version. I remember specifically with the drawbridge, because the bridge part was plastic and the team version was wood.
Yeah.
Right. So it behaved totally different on the field versus in practice. Yeah.
That's always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Building the home version of a field element is fidelity to how it's really going to behave, and knowing how to put the resources in on the things you really care about.
Yeah. Specifically right this year with the reefs, we wanted that curve on level 4, right? So it'd be more field representative. Yeah.
And the stiffness of it, right?
Yeah. Right.
It was still really hard to do. Our branches, not even close to what they should have been. I mean, you just looked at them. One was like, the other one was like,
yeah.
And we're like,
and this Gears game was a huge challenge for that, because you've got this,
you have
4-inch opening.
Like this.
Yeah.
You got an air band about the size of a baseball, right? And you're just not going to hit that goal.
Yeah.
And when your practice field's screwed up, you calibrate to that.
So, sorry, we can cut this.
That's the big one. No, leave this in. This is great.
No, okay. So, no, sorry. I was gonna ask about.
You know what?
They're just nervous.
You being
Our boss,
a head ref, right, and your transition from being from an inspector to a normal ref, and then up to a head ref, right? So for like a open position for a head ref, right? Let's say it first needs to have a couple head refs be filled in, for whatever district or whatever regional. What can the younger refs anticipate? What can they anticipate if they want to be a head ref?
Lots of hazing, primarily. Yeah, lots of trials. No, it's. I think the best advice I could give is like everything is an interview for everything else, right? If you live your life like that and say, well, I'm going to show up to this event, I'm going to do whatever's best for the event, I think that will naturally bring out in you the skills and the kind of the things that the key volunteers, like your volunteer coordinator, are looking for. Like, can I rely on this person to show up? Can I rely on them to be ready? Can I rely on them to deal with stressful situations in a professional manner that the teams, everyone can leave feeling good about, right? That's really what they're looking for. All these jobs, all these key volunteer jobs are really a customer relations job, right? In the referee context, yeah, you got to know the rule book, right? But really it's about managing a stressful situation and helping the event pull off the best event that can be achieved. That's really what it comes down to. People think it's about, well, being really litigious about the rule book, but no, it's really, for a head ref, kind of how you handle that question box, how you handle your other key volunteers. Like, we work very closely with the FTA and field supervisors, obviously, and just kind of coming into those relationships with how can I help, and not trying to defend your turf or like be protective about your role.
Sure. Okay.
This is something I noticed with working with you and a couple other head refs, but this might be getting too into the weeds. Where do you draw the line with let them play versus close the gate on them? I think a lot of head refs have their own limits on that, and I think it's very hard to find that limit, which is why I'm at the moment I'm not interested in being a head ref. Right? I don't feel like I have that. I haven't found that point yet. So how did you find that point?
There's you got to use your judgment. It kind of depends on how the event's running and where we are, right? Obviously, if you're ahead of schedule by the book, that's the team's time. They get all that time, right? So if we're 5 minutes ahead, I'll go out there and talk to them. But it's usually what I'm saying is, hey, just so you know, we're 5 minutes ahead. This is your time. Take your time and do it right. If we're running on schedule or behind schedule, especially, we're going to try to apply a little bit more pressure. I tend to be very quick to, I think, the verbal warning, right? Let's get it on the record. Hey, you're clearly still putting bumpers on. We're ready to play, right? Yeah. We've done all the team announcements. All the other gates are closed. We're just waiting on you, and time is up. The head ref stand has a countdown timer that says when we should be ready to play the next match. Right. So once that time's up, I'm assessing the situation and like, hey, we're going to go put a little pressure on them. Now, if they immediately stand up, be like, okay, 10 seconds. Okay, we're done. I'm probably not giving it. Right. But, if they're still clearly working on it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you the verbal warning. And that tends to be enough. I went years without having to actually pull the trigger on a delay a game call. Right. Just by making them aware that, hey, there is a consequence to this, and this is what's coming on the next one. And that being said, I gave more B prompt fouls this year than I think total in all the previous years.
I think that's really important.
And some pretty notable ones. So
that's really important too, is giving them the why and the background and what's going to happen. Like, you did this is what's going to happen next. It's going to escalate, right? Because I feel like a lot of people just tiptoe around the zebras and the head ref, and it's like all the refs are very serious and we don't want to, I don't know, have fun with them, and it's like, no, we're all very cool and chill.
I'm always trying to put, especially the students, but I'm trying to put everyone at ease, right? And I think it's important, like, I print the game manual, right? It's thick, right? But you guys have ref with me before. Whenever we're having a discussion about a thing, I'm never trying to stand on my authority as a head referee to be the reason someone understands something or, this is the way it is. I'm like, even with you guys, after we've talked about it, right? I'm like, let's go get the manual, right? One thing is, for me, that just helps me. The repetition of that helps me like more solidly have it in my mind for the next discussion. But it's also like, I'm not perfect, right? We all, especially the more years you do this, right? One of the hardest things year to year is forgetting the rule they deleted, right? Yeah. And as a mentor as well, right? The robot construction rule section is big, right? Recognizing they removed like the flow restriction limit on the solenoid valves, right? Which was there for years, right? And then all of a sudden it disappeared, like recognizing that deletion. Anyway, back to the rule book, right? I go get the book, right? Because I want the students in the box. I learned this from Alan, great head ref in Michigan. I view him as a mentor. Go get the book. It buys them time to cool down, gives you a minute to think about it. You go get the book, you walk back, you flip to the page, you read it together, right? Now we're on the same page. 80% of question boxes are done right there. They say thank you and they walk away because they didn't understand the rule and now they do. Right. And often they'll really thank you for that because they learned something and they know how to think about it and approach it going forward. Then sometimes they'll argue, should that be the rule? Is that really the rule? Is that really what happened? Those are the harder ones to deal with. But going to the rule and getting on the same page, right? I'm never asking them to just trust in my authority.
Has being a head referee eased or created any challenges with being a head mentor?
We're going in deep on this one.
Nathan's nodding.
I'm just saying, that's a great question. Jason's on point today.
I think the biggest challenge for me is that I have come to love volunteering so much that being at an event with your team, I'm emotionally invested for the sake of the students. Like I try to tell them this, and we talked about it a lot this year, right? I don't really give a crap if we win or lose, as long as we go play our best, right? But I want success for them. Like I don't care about the medals. I don't care about the trophies in that, right? I want a good experience for them. So I'm emotionally invested, and that takes a toll, right? People ask like, how could you head referee? That seems so stressful. It's a different kind of stress. It is, right? It is just so much fun though. And the stress comes from wanting to do a good job, but I'm largely in control of that. I'm not in control when my team's at an event, right? You guys know this. No team is in control, right? And so if it's just a totally different thing. So that's really been my biggest challenges. I love this one part of it so much. And so a lot of us, we have a lot of volunteers on our team, which means we sacrifice time with our team during the competition season to go help set up fields, to work at events, right? And those are 2 or 3 days that we have a tough time meeting as a team because all our volunteers, all our main mentors are off volunteering somewhere. Now, the flip side of that is we get a lot of benefits from that, right? You know, as a referee, you see the game from a different angle. You think about it differently the next kickoff, right? One of our approaches on our team is to try to make the robot inherently legal. Like, don't leave it up to a referee on a judgment call about whether or not we violated a rule, because that really bit us one year, like 2010. Our main mechanism, we had to rip off the robot because it just kept getting fouls. Now, we knew it wasn't illegal. It was a timing thing, and we got it back inside frame perimeter. But once the ref saw it once, the one time we didn't get it back in, every time they saw that mechanism, now we were at risk. We ended up scrapping the thing. And that's devastating to a team, right? We spent the entire season building this cool thing, and now we got some whacker wheel on there that's kicking a ball. So that's been the biggest challenge. But like I said, there are benefits, right?
Can you go through more of your design tips and stuff that you go through kickoff day? Like,
Your
don't leave it up to a ref.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of other stuff that we go through on GatorBots on kickoff day.
When we're doing it right, I like to talk not so much about the design of the robot, but by principles by which we design the robot, right? Yeah. And some of it's just the stuff you always see, like touch it, own it, right? Don't try to pinch a thing when you can have a roller claw, right? Those sorts of things. And everyone says those things, right? Trying to use the field to help you align, right? Cameras are much better now. That one's really old, right? Because I come from a time when there was a serial camera and it was terrible and the light targets were bad, right? And then retroreflective tape came along. I was like, oh, this is so much better, right? But now we've got QR codes, April tags. They're even better, right? We're in a different era. So some of these things are us kind of holding on to some of that older stuff. One I think that's kind of useful on our team is like the last thing we always talk about is if it feels gross, or basically do you tell the students if they can't really verbalize the argument, just say, hey, this feels gross, right? Because one of the problems, especially having done this for 20 years, is like no one on my team's going to argue with me about the physics of a thing, right? Especially a high school student. They don't, maybe haven't even had physics, right? But this feels gross on our team means let's take a step back, help me understand this. Let's reconsider. It's supposed to like reset the mentor to be like, okay, maybe I'm overpowering this situation right now. Maybe I need to help them come up to speed because, I can't expect a 14-year-old to be able to achieve or have the knowledge that I have being college graduate with an engineering degree and have been doing this for 20 years before they showed up. So that's one I think, because you can have all the design principles you want, but if the kids can't like articulate and push for what they want to see in the robot, then they're still going to get bowled over by it.
So then, speaking of, robot design, right? What's your favorite 1250 bot you guys created over the years? Like, what was your big boy one?
I'm sure there's some recency bias here, but Crescendo, a robot 2 years ago, we had just lost our build space that we had been in off and on for 2 decades. We were building a robot out of a hallway at the school, right? Like we almost didn't register for 2024 because we weren't sure we were going to have anything.
We found our shop space 2 days before kickoff.
Oh,
yeah. So we basically we had a hallway where we started our crap and a classroom. The health teacher is super cool. She let us tape her carpet, right? And we were practicing in there all season. But so we had 6 kids to start. We picked up 1 freshman that year.
Yeah, Nolan.
Shout out to Nolan. And so we really had to constrain ourselves to building something simple. Now, luckily that game lined up well with that. The note was super flexible. It was easy to deal with, right? Super pliable. Once you got it inside your robot, you could manage it. And, we built a robot that had a single articulation, right? The arm that would move up and down. So we could pick up from the floor. We could shoot it in the amp. That's what we really focused on. We could also shoot it into the speaker. And we would use that arm with some teeth on the bottom of it to grab the chain and lift at the end. So the only part of the game we didn't play was the trap. And we did it all with like 1 moving part. There were other teams that are obviously better, right? But we got a lot of performance out of 1 moving part. I say moving part, like 1 articulated mechanism. There were intakes and stuff, other rollers and stuff. But I don't consider those as complicated because they don't move in 3D space and have to interact with other parts of the robot. So that one I'm really proud of because it was so simple and we did it with such a small team.
We followed all the design steps too, right?
Right.
Inherently legal, continuous intake, using the field elements, the subwoofer to line up to.
Yep.
All of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Did a really good job on that one, I think.
It was also that was our second year on Swerve.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I remember from that year is we were next to each other in the pits. You looked at our robot and you said, "It's so big." And since then, guess what I'm doing back at the shop? I'm looking and I go, "Guys, this is really big. Do we need it to be that big?"
In the early days, we could be 28 by 38, right? Which these days seems enormous. It's just enormous, right? But that was kind of the standard footprint back then. And 23, we built smaller. I can't remember about 22. We've been the same 25 by 25 the last 3 years, though. And just being a little smaller, you can get it in tighter spaces. It's helpful.
Okay. Like we talked about that, just kind of limiting ourselves. I think we were just talking about like taking 3 inches off the maximum this year.
Yeah. Funny story about this year. We were kind of debating the challenge of a smaller robot, right? Because packing it into a smaller size is more difficult. We initially had a coral chute. So we're on like a 30-degree down angle. And we're like questioning, like, this is going to be tight. Should we make it bigger? And we realized the look on Nathan's face the next day. We just decided we were going to make it 30 by 30.
Told me.
But I went home that night and realized that if we make the robot 5 inches longer, right, that 30-degree down angle is going to mean the coral is going to be like 3 inches lower when we hold it in the home position. It's barely going to clear the bumper, right? And then the elevator has to go even higher because now everything dropped on that pitch. And so I came back the next day and I'm like, guys, I think we got to go 25 by 25. And Nathan's look was just priceless. He's like, we just decided this.
And then like a couple weeks later, we're moving our ramp, our coral intake up even higher.
Yeah,
We're like,
yeah,
it solves everything.
We had miscommunicated the height that the coral thing needed to be at from the prototype into the CAD initially. And so all robot designs, you always look at the game in hindsight after the season. We should have done this. But every design is an iteration that's working through. It's an evolution that's working through like what is your understanding from kickoff day? What resources do you have? And it's interesting to me. We talk about game metas a lot, but the way teams kind of navigate those paths, right? And like this year, we went down a path. We were on a coral path, right? And we jumped over to a pure algae path after our first event because we're like, we're never going to get there with this coral thing. And if we make states with that, we will be irrelevant. So we kind of rolled the dice and said, let's drop coral and go algae and try to work on this deep climb thing. And close to making it, didn't quite pull it off, but the algae part worked. We just didn't get the deep climb in time to get the points we needed to make states. There's no clean way through that process. Everyone has to kind of navigate it on their own. And, 2 different teams, we all get the same rules first day, and everyone's got to negotiate that path given the resources they have, the students they have, what their goals are. And that's different for everybody. So it's always interesting.
Right. Well, speaking of like following the rules and then going back to your volunteer side, what's the easiest and hardest game that you have ref?
I think hardest might have been Charged Up.
Thank you.
Really?
Yeah, it was so hard.
The thing I think is hardest for referees, at least I know I spent a lot of time like getting it straight in my mind, is zone contact, because there's all the different iterations of it. Is it their bumpers are in and I touch them? Is it my bumpers in, they touch me? Is it either of us are in and we touch each other? Who caused it? Does that matter? Right? Is it robot or bumpers, right? Is any part of the robot in?
Yeah.
Right? Or out of a zone?
Yep.
Sometimes it's like, and this is one of the things about 23, you couldn't have 2 mechanisms out unless you were in a zone.
Yeah.
For greater than momentary, and it had to be consequential. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? A robot grabs a cone off the wall. They've got 2 mechanisms out. They're crossing out of the zone. As soon as they leave the zone, if they got an inch out, they're out, right? Well, it was a consequential. I don't know. As a referee, it's legitimately hard. Like, well, it was consequential in that they would have had to slow down to get that second mechanism in to legally leave the zone. That, in my mind, is consequential. Now, sometimes you find out through, clarifications to the rules in the next week after you played a week 1 that no, that's not actually consequential. Yeah. So those types of rules, I think, are the hardest. And they've done a good job the last 2 years in particular. Crescendo was good about this, right? It didn't matter who was in the zone. It didn't matter who touched who.
It was just one rule, too.
If you saw, if you saw bumper to bumper in a zone, it was a foul, right? So those are the hard ones. And again, going back to, I have to unlearn last year's thing I spent a lot of time learning, right? Because it changes every year. This year was different again. So those are the hardest to do. So this year was a pretty easy game to ref. There weren't that many zones, right? Most teams knew to stay away from the barge zone and their cages there. Most. At least in the later weeks, mostly. And it was always just, if I touch you while you're in your zone.
Right. And I know that transition from districts, right? We had a lot of obscure rules that flags were being thrown or whatnot, but then leading up to like the higher level of play, like states or worlds, barely call anything.
in terms of the teams got cleaner.
Right. In that
to be clear,
Yeah.
I feel like I have to say this. The rules are the same everywhere, right? We're always trying to go to the book, right? Now, the rules change over the season because there are game updates, right? But, the teams get better. It's still amazing, though, at the highest levels of play, right? I'm talking like states on Fimstein, champs, finals 3, let's say, hypothetically. I still get questions in the box that are explaining the basics of a rule that someone is arguing and doesn't understand. That's one of the challenging things too is, football, we can all no one does this, but we can all get the rule book and read it, right? Fans just complain about stuff. In this sport, the rules are always new every year, and none of the parents are reading those rules unless they're a mentor on a team. Few of the kids are even reading the rules, right? Most of the volunteers, most people look at it kickoff day and then never look at it again. I've had people come to the box with version 0 on their phone trying to read this. I'm like, well, I'm on version 9. So I think that really clarifies. Let's read the rule together, my version 9, and get to the bottom of this. And oh, that changed.
Do you think they're in the box at finals, for example, because they don't understand the rule, or more because they want to remind you and get a shared understanding of the rule?
There is that, and that's certainly something, within our team I advocate for. I tell we have a student drive coach. I tell her, go to the box early, go to the box often, right? First time you're in a match that any foul is called, go ask, just to break the ice, right?
Yeah.
And I tell Diana, right, you may not get what you want. Part of the reason the box is there as a student or as a team member, I think, is to help focus the referee crew on what you're seeing not get called. Back when you were on the team, 2016, we would knock down one of the defenses 3 and 4 times to get it to get scored twice.
Yeah.
Right. We sent the kids to the box over and over again. Right. I get an email after the event from the head referee who had watched that. I never even spoke to him, right? I was a referee at that time. He knew me, and that's why he emailed me. He's like, look, your kids were right. We were missing this. We're real sorry about that. So that is part of at least how we try to use the box is focus the refs on something you might think they're missing, right? I think in those cases, they were legitimately thinking the rule was the opposite of what it was, right? In the cases I'm thinking of from this year. And these are, teams that are making it to the highest level. They're veterans, right? But they don't think about it like refs do. And back to your question, that's one of the benefits of being on the volunteer side of things, right? Is we think deeply about these things, and we know we know those rules inside and out. We can help coach our teams better because of that.
Yeah, I like to think that until one of my students pulls out a rule and I'm like, nah, it's this. And then they do what you do, where they bring over the rule book and they go, well, actually, let's read this together. And they're actually right. But that's why I have a lot of hair.
Yes. But in some ways they have an advantage, right? You've got too much crap in your head from old games, right? It's easy to get confused, especially early in the season.
I still don't know what the new G204 number is.
217? I think 17.
19.
217? Thunder Chickens?
Was it 4?
Ian can look it up.
I had it a month ago. Contact inside the opponent frame perimeters. Because we all know 204 and 205, 206.
I went up to you a lot.
One of the things they've done better about is they're trying to lock down some of those numbers so that we're not relearning every rule every year. They changed the game manual to have the evergreen rules that are basically the same. And then, of course, they change pinning. But they're basically the same rule every year is helpful. I think both teams and volunteers. But it's
now it's minor foul and major foul even.
Yeah, how do you feel about the change of that terminology? Because I know from our side, I don't like
it. It's robot perimeter, not frame perimeter. It's scoring elements, not game pieces.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It doesn't matter. I mean,
422. Jeez.
422.
422.
Yeah. See, they changed it twice on us now in the last couple of years.
That. Oh well, maybe next.
That's part of the reason I always go back to the book because it's I don't remember the number, right? I want to know the number, right?
Yeah.
And I know the rule. I just don't know the exact number. So it's one more reason to go to the book, because they're reading the rule. I'm trying to memorize the number.
Yeah, if anything, right, for the pit crew that's watching, right, read the game manual. You got to do it. Just got to.
More than once.
More than once, please.
More than once.
More than
Yeah.
once, please, for our sake, please.
Not necessarily the whole thing. But I'm serious. Like if you're designing the robot, right, there's a lot of stuff in the construction rules you got to know, right? If you're a drive team, knowing that section 7, right, 6 and 7, right, you really got to have that down.
So I know for our process on GatorBots as a team, we get the game manual, sit down together, read through everything, kind of paraphrase the robot construction rules, because like you said, it doesn't change too much. From a head ref perspective, when you get a new game manual, how do you digest it, study it? Do you use flashcards? What do you go through to memorize that stuff?
I have written out flashcards that I don't look at. For me being old, as we've established I am, writing things by hand is a way to lock it into my brain, right? I didn't grow up on a device. I had a computer when I was in high school, but not a great one, right? So writing it down is a way for me to lock it in my brain. So I'll go through and just write down the number and the names, just the short names even, right? To help with that. I don't transcribe the entire thing again, and then I'll go back to it once a week in the January, maybe, go through a couple sections a day or a couple sections every couple of days as we get closer. One thing I do a lot is while I'm in the car, I'll throw on a PDF to audio transcriber.
No.
He's pulling the Joe Rogan.
Have it read this PDF to me, right? And just like, okay, today we're doing section 7 on my drive to robots, right? It accesses a different pathway to your head than reading it, right? And so, and you pick up on different things when you hear it badly spoken aloud. And it's terrible because all the blue box, 0.2 subsection G, right? Just it all comes out. It all comes out terrible. But you hear it in a different way. You process it in a different way. So I take a lot of different avenues to doing it. A couple of years ago, there was I remember it was Kyle from Rush and Andy Baker, and I think I can't remember. There a couple other longtime volunteers did a reading. They'd each take a rule and they released it as a podcast, as an audio file. That was great. I
want to hear that.
I would put that on as I was going to bed at night and set it on like a 15-minute timer and just let Andy Baker lull me to sleep.
Oh my God.
Reading the game rules.
Winners, reading a bedtime story about the rules.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
They only did it at the initial release, and that's part of the problem is, some of those rules changed. But
that's why you need a weekly podcast.
I understand not sitting down and wanting to read all 170 whatever pages it is, right? You can't think of it like that. There's some sections you can skip. There's some sections you go back to a bunch, right?
And there's some sections, or there's some sections you don't need to know right away.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's more, during kickoff, you're trying to prioritize everything, right?
Yeah.
And, some things like robot construction rules, maybe that's a little bit more important than not being able to contact your opponent inside this certain zone.
Yeah, I don't know. I might argue that a bit. The main things we look at in the rules, first question about construction rules I have is basically bumpers, right? Do they have to be continuous? What's the height range? What is required there, right? What's the max size? Sorry, I almost got it wrong. Robot perimeter. Used to be frame perimeter, right? What's the maximum sizes there? And that's pretty stable since they've dropped it to 120, right? What's the max weight? What's the starting height? What's the maximum height? Are there zone restrictions on height? After that, I want to know a lot about the game rules because we are going to then go into what are all the things a robot can do, right? And some of that is, I want to shoot from full court. Can't do that, right? You have to be outside of this zone to be able to do that. And so you gotta understand some of that to understand what the robot is allowed to do, right?
The kind of process we take is or at least myself, I understand. I get into those rules like no full court shots. That usually comes after we've prototyped something. We're like, oh, maybe we can do a full court shot, and then we kind of go through the rule book, see if it's actually possible. And for me, that's just better for me and able to digest information than doing it all at the first time.
I know you're not used to hearing this, but you're wrong. I'm kidding. Yeah, I can see that approach, right? Like one of the problems I have as being a 20-year mentor is I've got in my head things that won't work.
Mm-hmm.
But those things that won't work are from a time, like I said, pre-2013, right? We just didn't have a gearbox to do that. We're going to spend all season designing a gearbox to be able to do something like that? No. Mm-hmm. But that's still stuck in there from like 2006, right? So understanding what's possible, I think is a good exercise. Mm-hmm. One of the things I try to keep us from doing is going down. You can spend a lot of time building bad crap prototyping. I try to keep us from like developing a thing that can't make it on or has no reason to make it onto the final robot anyway, because it's such a resource sink for us, right? We are still a pretty small team. I think at our biggest, maybe in a competition season, maybe 24 students is probably where we peaked out.
Ever. Like 20 years, yeah. Like average is about 15.
Yeah.
10 to 15.
Yeah. Us at 16 is a really healthy team. Yeah. Right. But even that, they're not all there every night. So I've got 8 students, right? And we got one of my things I try to get us to do every day is like, what questions do we need to answer today, right? That will inform our thinking before the next meeting. If you don't answer a question within this meeting, right? I'm going to be chewing on it for the next 20 hours before our next meeting, right? Mm. I hope our students are as well. I'm not always so sure about that part. But like, what are the questions we answer, especially in these early weeks? How do we get an answer today that will inform our thinking for the next day, right? So that we can leave this meeting knowing what we should be thinking about. Because if I don't quite get the prototype done, then I'm just going to be thinking about how I didn't get it done, right? But if I get it done, we get an answer like, hey, this works. Full court shots are plausible. Mm-hmm. Right now I can start thinking, how do I integrate that in the robot? Or it's like, hey, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? What could we change for tomorrow? But you know, everyone prototypes, again, according to their skill level, according to the resources they have at hand, but trying to keep us from going down rabbit holes that just won't work out for the rules is what I see as part of my role on the team. There's a balance there of like letting the students experiment. But again, I'm like trying to keep us within the bounds of physics as I understand it. So
we also do a lot of that prototyping in CAD too, or have in the last couple of years. Post-COVID, it's been a bit tougher. But a lot of that can be done with Crayon CAD and just CAD in general. And even just like making prototypes faster, a lot more 3D printed parts. When we discovered Clecos, oh my God, that was a game changer for us. Yeah. So just being able to prototype faster has been instrumental as well.
Well, and sometimes it's really simple. It's like, I'm going to design a thing, right? Hopefully it's a student, right? We're going to design a thing that's going to shoot a ball, right? Okay, we're going to build into that holes every 1/4 inch so we can adjust the squish, right? And we're going to be able to adjust the squish on the wheels this way and this way. And throwing all that into a CAD model and just whipping it out on a CNC router, right? Spending the time to do it in CAD, right? Saves so much time of getting bad answers, right? And there's nothing worse than throwing out an idea. It was a good idea, but you prototyped it poorly.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so like taking the time to like, okay, we're going to think about this for a minute. What are we going to need to adjust? Slap it into CAD, pop it out on a CNC router, right? Now it's easy to assemble, right? We're going to get good answers out of it that are repeatable, right? And we're really going to understand this problem inside and out.
That's very frustrating, or it's a frustrating problem for me is in prototyping when I'm trying to get the students to. My students are very like one-track minded people. They get on board with one thing and that's all they want to do. So I'm always trying to keep their minds open to everything. So, you know, I'll try to get them to, hey, maybe prototype this other thing right here. And they'll do it maybe just to appease me. It doesn't work once and they go, see, it doesn't work. Yeah. And then that's it. So
Malicious compliance.
Yeah,
problem.
There you go.
yeah.
Well, it is one of the challenges is, it's a challenge for students trying to get mentors to buy into their ideas. It's a challenge for us as mentors trying to get students to buy in, like trying to make the case for an idea. And that's, it's important to take the time to like help the student present the best version of that idea as a mentor, right? And that's why we go to CAD and it's like, okay, well, let's think about how would we make adjustments in this? Because we don't know all the answers right away, right? One of the hardest things to do, I think, is like estimate the loads or friction of a process, right? Like getting a robot to climb is relatively easy because it's like, well, I know how much the robot weighs. I can estimate friction, but trying to do that with a game piece that you don't know the coefficient of friction of or how it relates to how much you've squished it. Some of those things you just have to try and get a sense of, and then building a prototype that's good and can do that adjustment in a repeatable way. So you're not just going down hey, we made it do it once. Great. Obviously it's going to work on a field from 50 feet away with 5 other robots doing their thing. No, that doesn't work a lot, right? You gotta really understand a process and be able to adjust it finely, dial it in, and then put that in your robot.
Yeah.
Who do you like more, me or Jason?
I like all my children equally for different reasons.
I'm his favorite.
Do you have any favorite memories or favorite
my chat.
favorite memories, favorite volunteers, favorite events?
Favorite
Any
volunteers
praise?
as well.
Any praise you like to work with? I see you do Belleville a lot.
So
And you liked the Detroit events, right?
Belleville was my first head ref event. So it holds a special place in my heart. It also has the best food. And the scheme in Michigan among the head refs is if you had it last year, you get dibs the next year. And so my next year was 2020. And we didn't play that year. And our team was going to Belleville. And I don't head ref events where my team is going, at least not historically. And so I gave it up. And having given it up, it wasn't mine to call dibs on yet. And it's taken me until this year, until 2025, to get a shot at it again. And I finally got it back. So whatever's going on the Belleville week, you should not plan on me being there next year. Food's a big one. It's taking care of your volunteers, right, with decent food is, I know it's important to
Yeah, I know. I can attest to this too. If you got really good food, I'll what?
And a decent breakfast.
Well, okay. Breakfast is a little different because, right, the only other volunteer breakfast that was top notch was Milford. It was when Cindy Nader brought out like a whole buffet of like sausage, bacon, eggs, pancakes, and whatnot, and you can go to town on that.
Cindy's
I'm making that woman money.
Yeah.
All right.
I just want a
She's the
donut.
queen.
I just want a donut.
Yeah. Breakfast is very hit or miss. I'd like to put in a plug for Livonia. Lily VC'd it this year. Breakfast was good.
Oh.
Right. We had hot breakfast one day. Second day was hot sandwiches.
Oh,
Pretty good. No, hot like croissant.
oh,
egg,
the hot.
cheese,
Oh, I got you.
sausage, egg, and cheese
Okay.
croissant.
Okay.
You can't go wrong with that. I mean,
Okay.
that's my go-to in the morning if I'm in a hurry. So the food there was good. Renaissance, some new, at least 2 years ago, their first event was pretty good. They take a lot of notes. I know they talked to Eddie and like they were real interested when we were setting up Wayne State. How do we do this right?
Yep.
Everyone said food. And they had pretty good food, right? So, talking about favorite volunteers, I hate to get into specifics there because there's so many good volunteers. I am always
Yeah,
relieved
we
to
know what
see
you mean.
Philip at an event.
Not for long.
When I help with setup and tear down a lot, and part of that's just me being psychotic and not able to get enough. I didn't help for years, and then I'm trying to like make up for lost time there. So if I'm at an event, I'm trying to do setup and tear down as well. I know how much better it goes when you've got enough bodies who know what to do. And Philip's one of those bodies that I like to see show up because
How do you not lose your
there's a
backpack all
whole
the
section
time?
of a thing I don't have to worry about. Well, I'm an adult. And so I tend to put things in the same place every time so I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, it's always depend with you.
Well, it's great that you're available to help out. You know, I just
One of these
Pick up the
days,
slack.
maybe we can compare notes next time.
Yeah.
I'll watch what you do with your backpack. You can watch what I do with mine.
Yeah.
It helps as a head referee. I can basically put it where I want it and no one messes with it.
There you go.
right,
There you
so
go.
right next to
Yeah.
the fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
Is your backpack yellow?
No, I have looked for yellow backpacks. I haven't taken that leap yet.
Might be Jason's problem.
We should get you something like bright pink. Might be easier to see.
That'd help.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Any closing remarks, Brian?
what you got going on in your life? You know, any shout outs, anything you want to promote?
I don't understand the question.
His life is right here.
There's always this gap after champs. I try to do champs every year. The last month has just been work trying to dig out from the last 3 or 4 months of nonsense. There's always this interesting gap in the year where there's a point in the year where I put down the game enough that I could tell you the name of every game in order since I started, except for last year's game. I'm doing pretty good with Rescape. I still remember the name. I could tell you about the game. I'll be up to speed for our first off-season event. There's always this window where my brain just says, nope, we're done with that for now. And I'm not going to I couldn't tell you, it happened to me a couple weeks ago. I couldn't tell you what the end game was this year. Like, it's just gone. So yeah.
It's understandable.
That's great.
Looking forward to off-season stuff.
Yeah, can't wait to work
Keep it
with you
going.
again.
Well,
So,
it was such
all
a
of us.
pleasure to have you on the show, Brian.
Yeah. So thank you for joining BMO. Make sure.
Thank us for joining.
Thank you for us for joining. Am I supposed to say something? Thank you? Is that what I was supposed to say? I'm still trying to parse the sentence.
Make sure to like and
for
subscribe.
joining.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure to get your merch on shop.pitpodcast.com. We have our Pride merch still available for June, powered by Royal Shirtery. If you have any questions for Brian, leave them in the question form below. Make sure to say hi to him at the question box at any event. Thank you for this awesome LED gift, Brian. And it's been awesome.
Thanks. It's been fun.
Yeah. What time? Thank you. We'll see you.
See you at the
next-
competition.
at competitions, pit crew.
Oh, God.
Of all these people back here, these are the best 3 to put on camera.
We started this.
We got to work on